Gonna join the miners in the Coal Creek town. We're gonna light a torch and burn the stockade down. The soldiers are coming from near and far. Gonna take a part in the Coal Creek War. Gonna take a part in the Coal Creek War.
It might come as a surprise, but one of the last wars ever fought on American soil happened right here in Anderson County in East Tennessee. That's right, and this story has got it all. Everything from government corruption and greed to slavery, the right to bear arms, or David versus Goliath. It was a classic case of the common man versus the United States government. You see, by the conclusion of the Civil War, both politicians and wealthy businessmen had learned that there were deep veins of coal and iron ore in the mountains of East Tennessee, and they began purchasing hundreds of acres of land and began mining operations, hiring hundreds of local folks to work in these mines. And when you think about it, these were the first real jobs to come to these remote mountains. Folks living here had always made their own clothes, their own furniture and housing. They worked the ground for all their food. But now, these coal mining companies, they had set up company stores with all sorts of goods that miners could purchase by working in these mines. Sugar, clothing, furniture, whiskey, you name it. And the miners did. In fact, most of these miners actually ended up with huge amounts of debts to these company stores that they could never repay. And this meant that they could never stop working for these mines. It was a vicious cycle, and the mining companies had them right where they wanted them. Coal miners in Tennessee usually weren't union members, but they would still strike or walk off the job if they thought their wages were being cut or the working conditions were too bad. Tennessee's state government, which had been deeply in debt after the Civil War, had started the practice of renting out prisoners for mining companies to use. It brought in money for the state, and it reduced labor costs for these companies, who could rent convicts cheaper from what they could pay their workers. And as you might imagine, folks started getting sent to prison for little to no reason to provide this labor. However, in 1891, a Briceville mining company brought these convicts to replace some striking miners. That's right, prisoners were forced to mine the coal mines for free, while the mining company padded the pockets of the Tennessee government. They fired all their paid employees. The 300 miners that were fired were furious, so they gathered every pistol, every shotgun or rifle that they could muster, and they surrounded the stockade that was holding the convicts and their guards, and they demanded that they surrender. When the guards finally surrendered, the miners put all of the convicts and guards on a train and sent them back to Knoxville. Now wait a minute. Do you think the politicians who were getting filthy rich were just going to sit back and let these Appalachian hillbillies ruin it all? No, not a chance. Tennessee Governor John Buchanan called out the state militia and personally led all of the prisoners back into Briceville, and it was just another case of the U.S. government using the military against its own people. But you see, these mountain folks were stubborn, and they were slow to quit when they believed in what they were fighting for. And let's face it, they were fighting for their families. After the governor left, the miners again took over to the stockade, and this time shipped the state militia members back to Knoxville along with the guards and the prisoners. They sent a message to the governor: "We struggle for the right to earn bread by honest labor, and we are opposed to the system of labor that may be invoked in our degradation." This time, the Tennessee governor promised the miners that the state legislature would hold a special session to consider outlawing convict labor leases. Instead, the legislature passed a law making it illegal for the miners to interfere with the convict lease system. This move by the Tennessee government resulted in an all-out war. Miners from all over the Appalachian Mountains learned about what the government was doing. They all decided to join together and form their own army against the Tennessee government. Miners from Kentucky and Virginia and all over East Tennessee, brought every weapon that they owned, and they marched into Briceville and declared war. For 2 years, they burned stockades, they freed prisoners, they had battles with the state militia. Gunfire echoed through the mountains, day and night, for 2 years. This caused massive problems for the politicians, because while they were making $75,000 a year by leasing out these prisoners, they were now spending over $200,000 a year just to fight this war. Now, isn't that something? The politicians were actually losing money, and lots of it, but they had to be sure that any American uprising against their thievery was punished. And at this point, that's all this war was about: the common man versus the government. Now, Tennesseans didn't care too much about convicts, but they did tend to sympathize with the miners, and so labor groups held rallies in the largest cities for the coal miners, and others sent the miners aid. Finally, the Tennessee's government had had enough. In 1893, the state abolished the convict lease system. This entire event in history is important, and one we should never forget. Next time someone suggests that Americans give up their right to bear arms, or that we should just trust the government, tell them this story about the Coal Creek War.
Where are you going, my little man? Crossing the mountain with that gun in your hand. I'm gonna join the miners in the Coal Creek town. We're gonna light a torch and burn the stockade down. The soldiers are coming from near and far, gonna take a part in the Coal Creek War. Gonna take a part in the Coal Creek War.